Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to the third session of the series on history, science, and faith in Islam. In the last session, we covered the period of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Today, our focus is on the historical times of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. Summarily, history bends to the will of man when it's exercised with faith and steadfastness. Umar radiallahu anhu was one such man. He bent history to his will, leaving a legacy that successor generations have looked upon as a model to copy. He was one of the greatest of conquerors, a wise administrator, a just ruler, a monumental builder, and a man of piety who loved God with the same intensity that other conquerors of his caliber have loved gold and wealth. The Prophet planted the seed of Tawhid. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, with his wise intercession at an historic moment, ensured that the seed did not perish with the death of the Prophet. It was during the Caliphate of Omar that the seed grew into a full-blown tree and bore fruit. Omar shaped the historical edifice of Islam. And whatever Islam became or did not become in subsequent centuries is due primarily to the work of this historical figure. Indeed, Omar was the architect of Islamic civilization. The achievements of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu are all the more remarkable considering that he lacked the advantage of birth, nobility, or wealth that some of the other companions enjoyed. He was born into the tribe of Bani Adi, a poorer cousin amongst the Quraysh. In his own words, before he accepted Islam, he was at various times a petty merchant and a shepherd who would often lose his sheep. From such humble beginnings, he rose to weld together an empire greater in extent than either that of Rome or Persia, and governed it with the wisdom of a Solomon, and administered it with the sagacity of a Joseph. Upon his election to the Khilafat, Umar radiallahu anhu was faced with the immediate geopolitical situation in West Asia. The Persian and Byzantine empires held the balance of power in the region, with the Euphrates River as the historical divide between the two empires. Persia also controlled Yemen and the territories along the Red Sea north to Mecca and Medina. The emergence of Islam and the unification of the Arabs altered this balance of power. It was a situation that neither the Byzantines nor the Persians could ignore. The triumph of Umar radiallahu anhu over the mighty Persian and Eastern Roman empires within a brief span of 10 years is one of the most remarkable stories in military history. When Umar radiallahu anhu became the Khalifa, the campaigns in Syria were ongoing. After the Battle of Yarmouk in 636, Byzantine resistance in Syria collapsed. Jerusalem, then a part of Syria, was a holy city. The Patriarch of Jerusalem offered the keys to the city provided the Khalifa himself came to accept them. When the Khalifa heard of this, he appointed Ali ibn Abu Talib radiallahu anhu as the acting Khalifa, and he set out north from Medina. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu was now the Khalifa of all of Arabia and of surrounding territories. He could have traveled as a conqueror in pomp and luxury. But he, like the other companions, had received his training from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Theirs was the kingdom of heaven and not of this earth. They held the key to the treasures of the earth, but only as a divine trust, as servants of the Lord. Umar radiallahu anhu traveled north on one camel with a single attendant, taking turns with him for the ride. As he approached Jerusalem, it so happened the attendant was on the camel and the Khalifa was walking alongside. The potentates of Jerusalem thought that the rider was the Khalifa and the man on foot in his patched clothes was the servant. They offered abeyance to the rider. When the Muslim commanders greeted the real Khalifa, the potentates of Jerusalem were astonished and bowed down in awe. Umar radiallahu anhu treated the conquered people with unsurpassed magnanimity. The capitulation document signed with the Christians upon the fall of Jerusalem provides an example, and I quote here, "This is the safety given by a servant of God, the leader of the faithful, Umar ibn al-Khattab, to the people of Ilya," which is the area west of the Jordan River. This safety is for their life, property, church, and cross, for the healthy and the sick, and for all their co-religionists. Their churches shall neither be used as residence, nor shall they be demolished. No harm shall be done to their churches or their boundaries. There shall be no decrease in their crosses or riches. There shall neither be any compulsion in a religion, nor shall they be harmed. This document speaks for itself. The Muslim armies were fighting for the freedom of worship, not for religious conversion. The Byzantines tried to regroup in Egypt and use it as a base to recover Syria. In 641, Umar radiallahu anhu sent an expedition under Amr bin al-As to Alexandria. Alexandria fell, and the Muslim armies continued their advance as far as Tripoli in Libya. Meanwhile, the Eastern Front with Persia was active. The Persians did not take lightly their losses in the border areas west of the Euphrates River. They reorganized, put their western defenses under the famous Khorasani general Rustum. What had started as a border war became a test of strength between the Arab and Persian empires. After a series of skirmishes, a decisive battle was fought on the plains of Hadasiyah in the desert, about 40 miles from the Euphrates River. Rustum fought bravely, but was slain in battle. The Battle of Hadasiyah in the year 637 was one of the turning points in world history. It marked the beginning of the end of the Persian Empire and the birth of the Islamic Empire. Madain, the capital of the Persian Empire, fell soon thereafter. Yazdgar fled Madain towards Merv in northeastern Persia. He assembled a huge army of 150,000 and put it under the command of Mardan Shah. The two armies met at the Battle of Nahaband in the year 642 of the Common Era. Numan fell in battle, but the Arabs were victorious. It was another of the major victories in the eastward expansion of the Arab Empire. By the year 650 of the Common Era, the Persian Empire had disappeared. Yazdgar, fled Persia and died in exile. Persia became a part of the Islamic world and for 1400 years has been a pivotal region in Muslim affairs. When Umar radiallahu anhu was informed of the victories over Persia, he went to the mosque of Medina and addressed the people. O believers, the Persians have lost their kingdom. God has made you inherit their country, their properties, and their riches, so that He may test you. Therefore, do not change your ways. Otherwise, God will bring forth another nation in place of you. I feel anxiety for our community from our own people. These were prophetic words. As we shall see in other sessions, the riches of Persia did change the ways of some in Medina and led to the civil wars that tore the Islamic community apart. Umar radiallahu anhu was a superb administrator. He established a shura, or a consultative council, and sought advice on matters of state. He divided the far-flung empire extending from India to Tunisia into the provinces of Makkah, Medina, Syria, Jazira, which is the region between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates in Iraq, Basra, Khorasan, Azerbaijan, Persia, and Egypt. A governor answerable to the Khalifa was appointed for each province. The responsibilities and the limits of each governor's authority were clearly defined. The executive and the judiciary were separated, and Qazis were appointed to administer justice. Umar radiallahu anhu had the open-mindedness to accept and adopt what was good in other civilizations. He was an open-minded man. Where applicable, he learned from and adopted the technologies and administrative practices of the conquered people. Windmills were in extensive use in Persia at the time, and Umar radiallahu anhu ordered the construction of windmills in several of the Arab cities, including Medina. When Abu Huraira returned with a large bounty from Bahrain, there were differences amongst the Medinites as to how to divide it up. Khalid bin Walid, observing the divisions, suggested to the Khalifa that a department of documentation be set up in Medina similar to the ones he had seen in Persia. Khalifa Omar inquired about the Persian practices, and after satisfying himself that they were indeed applicable to the Khilafat, ordered that a department of documentation be set up. As most Arabs were illiterate, he hired Persian scribes to man this new department. Later, the department was expanded to document all transactions of the treasury and of the army. Following the example of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, the preparation and maintenance of documentation became an honored profession amongst Muslims. And Khalifas and Sultans alike, down to the Ottomans and the Mongols, and the Mughals later, and the Nizam of Hyderabad, kept this tradition alive. It was during the Khilafat of Umar radiallahu anhu that Islamic jurisprudence and his methodologies based on the Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, and Qiyas were fully established. He affirmed the individual responsibility of every person before the law. Every individual was a legal person and was innocent before proven guilty, and that too after due process. The edicts of Umar radiallahu anhu, reflecting the consensus of the companions, provided the foundation for the Maliki school of fiqh that emerged 100 years later. The military was organized professionally. Finance, accounting, taxation, and treasury departments were organized with full accountability. Police, prisons, and postal units were established. The land was surveyed and agriculture was encouraged. Old canals were excavated and new ones built. Large areas of land were brought under cultivation. Roads were laid out and were regularly patrolled. A traveler could move with safety all the way from Egypt to Khorasan in Central Asia. The vast territories of West Asia and North Africa were welded together into a free trade zone. Trade fostered prosperity. Education was encouraged and teachers were paid. The study of Quran, Hadith, language, literature, writing, and calligraphy received patronage. Umar radiallahu anhu was himself a poet of repute and a noted orator. Over 4,000 mosques were built during the Caliphate of Omar radiallahu anhu. Technology, such as the construction of windmills, was encouraged. Old bridges and roads were repaired, and new ones were built. A population census was taken after the example of the Chinese in the Tang dynasty. And it was Umar radiallahu anhu who started the Islamic calendar based on the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Umar ibn al-Khattab laid the foundation of Islamic civilization. He was the historical figure who institutionalized Islam and determined the manner in which Muslims would relate to each other and to non-Muslims, and would strive to fulfill the mission of Tawhid on earth. Ironically, this man of justice was assassinated for a verdict he had given in a civil case brought before him. One of the companions, Mughira bin Shu'aba, rented a house to a Persian carpenter named Abu Lulu Feroz. The rent was 2 dirhams a day, a sum Abu Lulu felt was too high. Ironically, this man of justice was assassinated for a verdict that he had given in a civil case brought before him. One of the companions, Mughira bin Shu'aba, rented a house to a Persian carpenter named Abu Lulu Feroz. The rent was 2 dirhams a day, a sum Abu Lulu felt was too high. He complained to the Khalifa, who gathered all the facts, listened to both sides, and gave the judgment that the rent was fair. This seemingly minor incident caused one of the biggest upheavals in Islamic history. Abu Lulu was so distraught at the verdict that he resolved to take the life of the Khalifa. The next morning, as Umar radiallahu anhu appeared at the masjid to lead the prayer, Abu Lulu hid in a corner, his double-edged sword concealed under his long robes. As the Khalifa stood at the head of the congregation reciting the Quran, Abu Lulu jumped at him and thrust his double-edged sword into the Khalifa's stomach. The internal bleeding could not be stopped, and Umar radiallahu anhu, the citadel of the community of believers, passed away the following day. The year was 645 CE. It is reported that Umar radiallahu anhu wept when the following verse in the Quran was revealed to the Prophet. We offered the trust to the mountains, heavens, and the earth, but they declined. being afraid thereof. But humankind accepted it. Indeed, humankind was unjust and foolish. Umar radiallahu anhu understood that the trust offered in here is the ruh, the spirit, which confers free will on humankind. When the will of man is exercised in a manner that befits human nobility, it elevates him to a position higher than that of the angels. No man understood this better than Umar radiallahu anhu, and few since the Prophet carried this trust with as much wisdom, humility, determination, sensitivity, persistence, and courage. Measured by any yardstick, Umar radiallahu anhu was one of the greatest figures in human history. This brings to a close our session on the life and times of Umar radiallahu anhu. In the next session, inshallah, we'll cover the life and times of Uthman radiallahu anhu. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.